Okay, so now we are getting recorded. শুভ সন্ধ্যা সকলকে। আমাদের আন্তর্জাতিক যারা পার্টিসিপেন্ট তাদের দুজনকে সুপ্রভাত। আমাদের সাথে রয়েছেন আমাদের রিসোর্স পার্সন আজকের সেশনে সুচেতা দাশগুপ্ত। সুচেতা, আপনাকে স্বাগত আমাদের এই ছোট্ট অ্যাড অন কোর্সে। সুচেতা আজকে যে বিষয়টি নিয়ে বলবেন সেটি হলো ট্রান্সলেটিং বাংলা পপুলার ফিকশন ইনটু ইংলিশ, অর্থাৎ আমাদের রাজর্ষি যে ধরনের অনুবাদের একটা দিককে কভার করে গেছে তার ঠিক উল্টো দিকটায় আজকে আমরা যাব সুচেতার সাথে। আমি আমাদের রিসোর্স পার্সনের পরিচিতি ছোট্ট করেই দেব। all of you who are interested to find out more about her, you can just Google. She's actually a public figure if you Google it that way. না মানে আসে আর কি, আপনাকে গুগল করলে সঙ্গে সঙ্গে সব তথ্য চলে আসে। তো at present she is a journalist at Deccan Chronicle. Is that right, Sucheta?
Yes, it is the Deccan Chronicle.
The Deccan Chronicle. And she has been an editor, columnist, journalist, obviously. But apart from that, she has always been an ardent lover of fiction. She has translated, and I think it is one of the most interesting translations of Bangla popular fiction till date, because I'm not, আমি নিজের মতামত ঠিক দিচ্ছি না, I am quoting a very senior academician whom I hold in very high esteem. তিনি একবার আলোচনা প্রসঙ্গে একদম পরিষ্কার বলেছিলেন যে আর্যাকে অনুবাদ করি, ত্রৈলোক্যনাথকে অনুবাদ করা ভীষণ শক্ত। তো সেই ত্রৈলোক্যনাথকে অনুবাদ করার যে চ্যালেঞ্জটা সুচেতা নিয়েছেন, এবং সুচেতার যে বইটি টেলস অফ আর্লি ম্যাজিক রিয়েলিজম নিয়োগী বুকস থেকে প্রকাশিত, সেটির কিয়দ অংশ উনি আমাদের সাথে কেস স্টাডি হিসেবে শেয়ার করেছেন। আপনারা আশা করি সেটা পড়েও এসেছেন। সেটিকে ফোকাসে রেখেই ওনার আজকের আলোচনা। আমি পিপিটি গুলি শেয়ার করতে থাকবো। সুচেতাকে আপাতত আমি আমাদের সেশন হ্যান্ড ওভার করছি। আমার এন্ড থেকে মাইক আর ক্যামেরা অফ হয়ে যাবে। সুচেতা, ওভার টু ইউ। এন্ড আপনি যখন নেক্সট বলবেন আমি স্লাইড চেঞ্জ করতে থাকবো।
Thank you, Devaditya. Namaskar, everyone. I am planning to start my session with a short reading from the original from Trailokyanath, and then again I will read the translated version. This is just to set the mood and also to familiarize the audience with the text of Trailokyanath and the style and the language of Trailokyanath. তো প্রথমে এটা হচ্ছে কঙ্কাবতীর প্রথম পরিচ্ছেদ, প্রাচীন কথা। কঙ্কাবতীকে সকলেই জানেন, ছেলেবেলায় কঙ্কাবতীর কথা সকলেই শুনিয়াছেন। কঙ্কাবতীর ভাই একটি আব আনিয়াছিল। আপটি ঘরে রাখিয়া সকলকে সাবধান করিয়া দিলেন উনি, আমার আপটি যেন কেহ খায় না, যে খাইবে আমি তাহাকে বিবাহ করিব। কঙ্কাবতী সে কথা জানিতেন না, ছেলে মানুষ অত বুঝিতে পারেন নাই, আপটি তিনি খাইয়াছিলেন। সেজন্য ভাই বলিলেন আমি কঙ্কাবতীকে বিবাহ করিব। মাতা পিতা সকলেই বুঝাইলেন, ভাই হইয়া কি ভগিনীকে বিবাহ করিতে আছে? কিন্তু কাহারও কথা শুনিলেন না। তিনি বলিলেন কঙ্কাবতী আমার আপ খাইল কেন, আমি নিশ্চয়ই কঙ্কাবতীকে বিবাহ করিব। কঙ্কাবতীর বড় লজ্জা হইল, মনে বড় ভয় হইল। নিরুপায় হইয়া তিনি একখানি নৌকা গড়িলেন। নৌকাখানিতে বসিয়া খিড়কি পুকুরের মাঝখানে ভাসিয়া যাইলেন। ভাই আর তাহাকে বিবাহ করিতে পারিলেন না। কঙ্কাবতীর গল্প এই রূপে। এ কথা কিন্তু বিশ্বাস হয় না। একটি আবের জন্য কেহ কি আপনার ভগিনীকে বিবাহ করিতে চায়? কথা সম্ভব নয়। যাহা সম্ভব তাহা আমি বলিতেছি। Then begins the story of Kankavati. So this very interesting prologue I have translated. I have called it part 1, the old wife's tale. Here it goes. Who doesn't know of Kankavati? As a child, everyone has heard a story. Kankavati's brother brought home a mango for himself. Placing it on the kitchen counter, he issued a warning. None may eat my mango. Whosoever does, I will marry that person. Konkavati hadn't known about the portent. A mere child she was. Not having understood the price entailed by the act, it was she who had eaten the fruit. Consequently, the brother said, I shall marry Konkavati. The parents did their best to dissuade him. Is it right for a brother to marry his sister? The young man paid little heed. Said he, why then did Konkavati eat my mango? No doubt I shall marry her. Konkavati was overcome by shame. Fear too entered her psyche. With no recourse at hand, she built herself a small boat. Seating herself in the boat, she floated right to the center of the pool in her backyard. The brother could marry her no more. Thus begins the story of Konkavati. Yet it is an incredible story. Can someone truly propose to marry their sibling for just a mango only? Let me provide you with a credible story.
আচ্ছা, আমি একটু ইন্টারাপ্ট করে একটু দেখে নিচ্ছি আমাদের পিপিটিটা দেখতে সবার অসুবিধে হচ্ছে কিনা। তার কারণ একজন কমেন্ট বক্সে জানিয়েছেন তার অসুবিধা হচ্ছে। মাসুদ, পিপিটি কি দেখা যাচ্ছে না?
হ্যাঁ, ভিজিবল তো।
আচ্ছা, তাহলে অভ্রা, আই থিংক আপনার কানেকশনে কিছু সমস্যা আছে।
না না হ্যাঁ, এখানে না একটা আর্টিকেল পপ আপ এর মতন আছে, কালবৈশাখী অ্যালার্ট ইন
হ্যাঁ,
বেঙ্গল।
ওইটাই পিপিটির প্রথম স্লাইড।
দ্যাটস দ্য পিপিটি।
ওকে আন্ডারস্ট্যান্ডেবল।
ওইটাই পিপিটির প্রথম স্লাইড। ওটা কেন ব্যবহার করা হয়েছে সেটা সুচেতা এখনই বলবেন আর।
Exactly.
Absolutely.
Okay. Thank you, Abra. Acha. So I'll just start my session now with the reading. So I am a journalist, and that's why I have picked up this headline, and I'll start with these two case studies. So this is one of the headlines. It reads, Kalboshiki alert in Bengal, thunderstorm and lightning likely, what's in store for Kolkata? And I would like Devaditya to show the next slide, please. Acha. Is the text visible in this? Let me just check myself. Yes, it is. So this here is a New York Times article. As you can all see, in the subsequent references to our very dear writer Sucheta Devi, the paper has used the words Miss Devi, which does not really mean anything, and it is a tautology comprising two honorifics only. No name, just two honorifics. Now we can excuse the New York Times and indeed also the Wall Street Journal, which did the same thing as well. But even our own newspapers got it wrong in the same way. Only reason I cannot mention their names is I did not keep those edition copies. But as a journalist, I have seen this mistake happen all around me. It is like unfortunately a common industry practice. The first report on the Kalboishiki suggests a reversal of this phenomena. Kalboishiki is now a legitimate headline word, as it should be, because it is a local phenomenon. The English word nor'wester can at best serve as a placeholder only, because it is simply not enough. It leaves room for a lot of confusion, because the Kalboshaki cloud, as we all know, it appears first in the Ishan direction, which is the northeast, right? So this is the role of translation in our life. It enables us to convey information successfully and accurately. And it kind of, it is everywhere, all around us. Even in the newspaper industry, we have to frequently interpret and translate the world around us, the world that we are reporting so lovingly to the audience. There is an element of translation in reporting as well. This is what I wanted to illustrate with these two slides. Now, as an activity, I came into translation pretty late in my life. As you can see, my journey has been like more philosophical, more intuitive than academic. In 2004, I subtitled a film, as part of which work I first translated Jibanananda Das's poem Ghash. That was my first work of translation. It was a small poem. In 2018, I did 2 chapters of Lulu, Trailokyanath Babu's long story about a ghost. In 2022, I translated finally 376 pages of Trailokyanath's 850-page omnibus, the first volume of which is now available in the market, as Devaditya said. Currently, I am also looking into the work of a contemporary Bengali writer who happens to discern magical wisdom in rural Bengali settings. Very beautiful, very quaint kind of writing. And I wish to disseminate it to more people. And also it is challenging to translate his work as well from a different point of view, because it is so different from Trailokyanath's. And Devaditya, can you show the third slide, please? Right. So is being Bengali not just genetic or linguistic or cultural or political, or a matter of belonging and shared identity as well? Is being Bengali not just all this, but also about carrying the Sangskriti of our Ingo-Mongo Shankar Itihas, our mixed history? When we watch period dramas set in Edwardian England, or say this film Living, starring an English actor Bill Nye, which is all about the life of an English bureaucrat in the 1950s, do we or do we not, as children of Bengali Bhadralok, or as people knowing Bengali Bhadralok very closely and having had to interact with them every day, have this sense of watching unfold before our very eyes our own history? The Bengalis are a community in translation, said Professor Minmoy Pramanik in his inaugural lecture to this course, mentioning Torjoma, an underappreciated essay written by the redoubtable essayist Promotho Chaudhary. He says, it is through the act of translation between our ancient Sanskritic and indigenous heritages and equally modern Western rational thought and influence that we, the Bengali, are continuously recreating ourselves as a community. And this, I say, is the kick of translation. Done successfully, it gives you the comfort of clarity, which is the comfort of resolution. And you can say, now that you know the history of my experience with this activity, you can say I'm a relatively new addict to this feeling. It also means that even if it is not vice versa, this there is a little bit of Ingrej in every Bengali soul. And now I'd like to get into the subject of my efforts at translating Bengali into English, the strategies I discovered along the way to be able to successfully convey the Bengali cultural register, the Bengali way of thinking and being, to an English-speaking audience. So I need to tell you who was my target audience as well. And I'd like Devaditya to show the next slide. So this is the Scopus theory, first published in 1978 by Hans Joseph Vermeer. It's also known as the functional theory of translation. This theory emphasizes the purpose or scopus of a translation as the primary driver of its creation and evaluation. What is the purpose of your translation? Is it an adaptation for a musical or a screenplay or a radio drama? Is it aimed at children, so it needs to be in abridged form? Who is its target audience? The three principles of the Scopus theory are scopus, coherence, and fidelity. Fidelity in terms of the author's scopus rather than go word for word. So who was my target audience when I translated the works of Trailokyanath Mukhopadhyay? Believe it or not, my target audience was neither a global audience nor a pan-Indian one. Even if I would be very happy to reach his work to their door, and I would consider myself fortunate to have done so if I have. But my target audience was my fellow English-speaking, or rather English-aware Bengali. I wanted to tell this English-aware Bengali that Trailokyanath is not just some silly fantasy writer we read in schools and colleges, and he's certainly not a children's writer, as blurbed by an happened to be envious Rabindranath Tagore, just because he himself could not match the versatility of Trailokyanath. I wanted to tell my fellow Bengali that Trailokyanath Babu is phenomenal, that he is one of the first people in the world to have written in the genre of speculative fiction. Speculative fiction being an umbrella term covering fantasy, psychological horror, magic realism, supernatural fiction, and science fiction. Yes, Domru Chorit, which is 100 pages long and comprises 7 parts, and we read only a tiny portion of it in our school textbooks. It has science fiction elements too. So did Trailokyanath Mukherjee then invent speculative fiction writing in the turn of the 19th century? We cannot be sure. But I wanted to put forward this question before my reader, whom I imagine to be, first, I imagine him to be a fellow Bengali, equally flattered by the prospect, because it is natural, to want to share in the reflected glory of our own, but also one who is equally committed to the duty as a fair-minded person from any community to give the relatively unsung Trailokyanath Babu his due. And so, yes, that has been my objective behind translating his work. To give Trailokyanath Babu his due, because having been in the British government's employ and having got downplayed by the mainstream literary establishment, the ingenuity of his work had been permanently consigned to the blind spot of history. And he has remained known chiefly as a satirist and a children's writer, post-independence as well. The remarkable facets to his writings have not been explored academically or even appreciated by the lay reader. So what are the strategies I may have adopted while translating the work of Trailokyanath? I would like to share these with you. But first, let us learn a little bit about the man. Devaditya, please show the next slide. Trailokyanath began his writing career upon retirement. He is known as an art historian in non-Bengali speaking communities who do not know about him as a writer. He was the curator of the National Museum in Calcutta. Before that, he was a school teacher, he was a police inspector, he was an editor of an Odia paper called Utkal Shubhakari. He spoke Odia himself. Having learnt it only a short while before becoming the editor of the Odia paper. He was a clerk in the British government, and then he became an official in the British government's agriculture department. And then he went on to save many lives by advising the cultivation of carrots during the 1876-78 famine in Uttar Pradesh. Ultimately, he became the curator of the National Museum. Trailokyanath was also one of the first Indian writers in English. It's a little known fact. He wrote a travelogue in crisp, beautiful English called A Visit to Europe. It comprised 430 pages. It was not very small. His first major work was Konkabuti. It was published in 1892. His last work was Domru Chorit. That was published posthumously in 1923. He passed away in 1919. In all, he wrote about 8 novels and 24 stories. Probably, it's my hunch that he wrote to entertain himself. It's my theory that he wrote to entertain himself mostly. And being intelligent, like being so supremely intelligent, his stories came out perfect in form and highly evolved in content. Trailokyanath straddled the Victorian and the Edwardian eras. In order to capture his sit-down, laid-back Boitoki style, his dry humor and his slow, formal, immersive tonality, I myself decided to go for a Victorian style of English so that I can catch all these elements most comprehensively. Again, because I'm translating for the modern reader, and because Trailokyanath himself was an acute thinker who never actually held back when it came either to exploring the limits of the human imagination or being goofy and campy and making jokes, I too did not stop myself from using the occasional modern idiom or expression to convey his point, or for effect, or to retain the spontaneity of the text, or for bakspandota, emphasis. But where exactly are you going to do this is your call as a translator, and that you will know only from your reading of the text. Next slide, please. So this reads, on this day of Bhadro, which is the 3rd of the dark fortnight, I, Miss Konkaboti Devi, hope to live in heaven with my husband for as many years as there are kingdoms in the body of man, and so it goes. This is before she is about to consign herself to the funeral pyre of her husband, who is called Ketu. So Miss Konkaboti Devi is a modern way of taking the name of my heroine. So here I'm breaking style because I want to emphasize the moment, the importance of the situation. If I hadn't added Miss, it would have seemed like any other regular act of puja or worship, not one as momentous and irreversible as the sacrifice of Sati. Now, regarding the matter of the sacrifice of Sati, I do not agree that it is a sacrifice, nor do I agree that it is the act of an honest woman. This is my personal opinion. And I managed to include it in the glossary without being so direct. Because my job is not to sanitize the text, never. I have to be faithful to it as far as I can while preserving the scopus of the intent of the writer. So except for such rare stylistic flourishes like using the honorific Miss for the sake of better readability and for sake of emphasis, I have been faithful to the text. I have actually translated every Bengali expression and adage word for word. And here, adopting the Victorian style did help a lot because it added weight and seriousness to the final text, required by the reader to pay attention for him in order to understand it fully. But clearly, you also can see why Konkaboti, who is a 12-year-old girl who befriends a mosquito child and meets talking frogs and goes up to the sky on the back of an ogre and then meets the moon and the star bride, she's still not the heroine of a children's story. It becomes very clear now. And I'll go to the next point. Again, it is a point about taking the translator's call. It's for that I need Devadip to show the next slide, please. So this is from when Vidyadhuri lost her appetite. So the story opens like this. Said Rosie the maid, "Now look here, Vidyadhuri. On our master's fair countenance, stop putting lime and shoe black." Again, this expression lime and shoe black is a direct translation of the original Chunkali. I preserved it in the final text, like I preserved many other expressions. In fact, I think as far as expressions go and idioms go, I preserved all of them because I wanted to educate the non-Bengali knowing reader as well about these small nuances, small stories, subplots inside our language. And I did it also for the sake of authenticity. But in the same instance, see, I'm inventing the name Rosie for the maid, who in the original is called Golapi, because I thought Rosie conjures up the image of her being the youthful, talkative, feminine one in the group in a far better way than the stolid sounding Golapi, which rhymes with Illol and Batapi from Raman. And it makes one think of a rather implacable woman, as plump as a pomelo fruit, rather than a pretty, vivacious, spontaneous Rosie. Then I go to the next slide, where the wife says, "Indeed, when one grows very old, one loses both eyesight and cognition. Haven't you seen the one who is right under your very nose?" And the Bengali original, it says, স্ত্রী উত্তর করিলেন, বৃদ্ধ হইলে চক্ষুর দোষ হয়, বুদ্ধি শুদ্ধি লোপ হয়, চক্ষুর উপর দেখিয়াও দেখিতে পাও না। তনু রায় বলিলেন, কে বলো না শুনি। Here I took the translator's call of writing under your nose instead of before your eyes, because under your nose is more informal and hence more appropriate to the mood of the delivery. So here I have been less than faithful without compromising the scopus of the writer. I'll give you another example of Bakspondota before I move to the next topic. So this is all about Tritiyo Bhag, Prothom Porichhed, Shutikagar. It is from Trailokyanath Babu's social realist comedy of manners. It's called Phokla Digambar. Next slide, please. তৃতীয় ভাগ প্রথম পরিচ্ছেদ সুতিকাগার. This is from Phokla Digambar. It is a comedy of manners by Trailokyanath. It's 98 pages in the original. I'm planning to include it in my second volume of Mr. T's droll stories. The first one I called in my mind Mr. T's zany stories, as these are like working titles that I gave to my work. So Phokla Digambar is a love story between the intrepid Hiralal and the enterprising village girl Kushi. They marry in the first part, go to Kashi, where the story opens, and then Hiralal disappears and is presumed dead. The man who meets them in Kashi is Jadov Dakhtar, whom I have referred to as Mr. Yadav. And because I didn't want him to be thought of, if I said Dr. Yadav, people might have presumed that his surname is Yadav. And it is a common practice to use the first name to the honorific as well. So I think in the first instance, I wrote Dr. Yadav, but then later on, I refer to him as Mr. Yadav. Mr. Yadav or Yadav Dakhtar is both the narrative voice and the author's voice in the story. He carries the author's opinions, observations, prejudices, judgments, everything. And he goes to meet Kushi after some more years when she's believed to be a widow and is being forcibly married or married against her wishes in the least to an old, toothless, dirty old man called Digambar, who already has a wife from a previous marriage who's as old as he is. And he, Mr. Yadav, is supposed to play the part of an elder in the bride's party. So what does he do? He's feeling this call inside him to rescue Kushi from his predicament, but he also doesn't want to jeopardize his friendship with the head of the household, to which now Kushi belongs. So that is basically the story. And to illustrate how you pick out certain words and treat them with special care, in a work as a translator, I picked out Shutikagar. Why did I pick out Shutikagar? The word itself has a special significance. Kushi's mother is dying at childbirth. In the early days, Bengali women gave birth in a special chamber outside the house, which was flimsy, made of palm fronds, completely exposed to the elements. Similar when they menstruated. It was all very terribly unhygienic, frequently leading to deaths when it came to childbirth, which is the reason why both child and maternal mortality were extremely high during that time. And it remained quite bad until it corrected itself quite recently. As recently as 2017, when the World Health Organization reported for the first time the first significant reversal in this trend when it comes to figures coming out of India. So in this story, Kushi's mother gives birth alone in such a special chamber outside the house, and she is drenched in the thunderstorm, and she does not survive. So it's all superstition to keep the house pure and clean, but it goes and claims her life. Trailokyanath, the humanitarian, is writing about. So I wanted to give a special name to this chamber in English that conveyed all that it signified. So I shuffled some words around in my head, I dug around a little, and then I came out with accouchement chamber. Accouchement means parturition, the act of giving birth. So Shutikagar becomes accouchement chamber. I treated this word with special care. This is not like, I would not have done so with the other words in the text. This is the translator's call. Even the word Phokla of Phokla Digambar, it emphasizes gumminess more than toothlessness. Toothless Digambar would mean a harmless Digambar, a feeble adversary, not the chief villain of a whole 98-page story. So it is gummy Digambar in the title, not toothless Digambar automatically. So in the case of Trailokyanath, in this way, I have been faithful sentence for sentence, if not word for word. But sometimes, in case of other texts, for example, you may have to add a sentence or paraphrase depending on the context or style of the narrative. You can be more free. Whether you do a faithful translation or a free translation is the call of the translator, depending on the nature of the text and the style of the narrative. For instance, in the case of the writer that I'm now translating, who writes in a very colloquial tone, being a contemporary person, the flow of his language leaves room for these kind of alterations, because the nature of the Bengali language is such, especially colloquial language, what you say in 2 sentences, when you're conveying the information to the reader in English, can easily be said in 1. And sometimes there are words where you need to add a sentence to explain the context, because that is assumed in Bengali. And this is all in service of the writer's intent or scopus. So for him, I have adopted a racier format. And now let us go to the theory of Gideon-Turi. Next slide, please. So this here is the picture of Gideon-Turi. Gideon-Turi, who passed away in 2016, was an Israeli scholar who translated between Hebrew and English, and he is known as the father of descriptive translation studies. Next slide, please. So descriptive translation studies does not privilege the source text over the translated text. And it bases itself on the need to consider translations as facts of the target culture for the purposes of research. So the work of the translator is important to that degree, and it just cannot be any irresponsible transcription. And also equally, sanitizing a text except when adapting it for children or for a special purpose is a no-no. I would say except when adapting it for children, because I personally do not believe in sanitizing a work, because even if it is flawed, that also should be, that is information as well, and that also should be presented to the reader. Now, Gideon-Turi says that becoming a translator implies learning to play a social role according to a set of intersubjective translational norms enforced within a given cultural environment and applicable to all kinds of translation. These norms are defined as the translation of general values or ideas shared by a community as to what is right and wrong, adequate and inadequate, into performance instructions appropriate for and applicable to particular situations. Now, let us focus on the word intersubjective. This can be a political word. The values and ideas that are determining what is right and wrong, adequate and inadequate in translation are intersubjective and can very well be what the translator subjectively determines to adhere to, and by so doing, during his act of translation, imparts them to his audience, making the means chosen to do so thus intersubjective. So the question that now emerges is, it's a personal question for me, how as an atheist and an egalitarian did I stay true to my politics while translating Trailokyanath? What means did I adopt? What was Trailokyanath's politics? Trailokyanath himself, for all his virtues and flaws, was neither perfectly egalitarian, he was a humanist, he was a classical liberal, but he was neither perfectly egalitarian nor unbelieving in God. He was a Brahminical purist, you can say, who disliked alcohol, for instance, because that becomes very apparent in a story called The Legend of Raiku, where he doesn't have good words for the Japanese traditional drink sake, even though it is a traditional drink and it represents Japanese culture. He did not have any good words for it. And he also looked down upon the act of drinking. And when it comes to women, for instance, he is wonderfully accurate in portraying the inner child in women, like in Konkabuti, for instance. Her wish to be a hero in the eyes of her husband. is a little known phenomena in women, because women are told to love passively, and they are known, like people think that women love passively, but in the service of that love, women sometimes want to do great, wonderful things, and they also would like to be praised for doing those things. And there is a part in Konkabati where she goes and cuts off the herb in Ketu's hair, which is actually the curse that turns him into a tiger. Because Ketu has shifted shape and become a tiger. He will remain a tiger for a particular period of time. She's told not to cut the herb out of his hair, remove the herb, but she goes and does it because she wants to be praised by Ketu for having rescued him from this kind of an incarceration. That actually starts the trouble in Konkabati, because then he becomes vulnerable to being devoured by the demoness. So Trailokyanath is a very good reader of the mind of the women, especially when they are children. But he also does believe in old-fashioned gender roles, because in his mind, women always have to be useful to the family. They always have to be constantly performing petty chores and domestic labor, or labor in the service of the family, rather than spend time thinking and reflecting, or being emotional even, or thinking about big talking points. He calls such women Puto in two of his stories, like in Kokla Digambar as well as in The Mysterious Ring. He says that the modern Bhadramohila will read books and then lie in a blue funk on the bed, getting all het up about issues that don't concern them. So clearly he thinks that this kind of a demeanor, this kind of a behavior does not suit a woman. And then again, he includes the subject of Shohomoron, which is commonly known as Shutidaha Protha. Yes. So he includes this theme in at least two of his creations. One is Konkabati, the other is a long story. It's called Megher Kole Jhikimiki Shoti Hashe Piki Piki. It's a long ghost story which involves rebirth, etc., but it is also a love story. So what I did was, to begin with, I set some ground rules for myself. Then I made my small decisions as I went along. So for one, I adopted the singular they as the third person generic pronoun wherever I think. So instead of he or she, I would use they when talking about a ghost or a servant or a role whose gender is undefined. Like even for God, I use they as a singular pronoun. Then I use lowercase for the first letter of the word God, or the Lord God, or the Lord God above all, the great creator. It becomes, in my translation, the great creator themselves rather than the great creator himself, where G will be capital letter, C will be a capital letter, H will be a capital letter. For me, it is the great creator themselves, all run on small letters. In Vidyadhari's story, there's a place where it is the Lord of the world, Jagannath. So only the J of Jagannath is capitalized. So these are the small, these are the ground rules that I set for myself. And then as I went along, there were certain words I encountered, how I would translate them. Those decisions I took while translating. Next slide, please. The slide on sweets. So, Shorbhaja Kheer Mohan. These are all, I have used small letters and I have not made them italics because these are all legitimate sweets in the world of sweets, just like Sandesh and Jalebi, which are part of the dictionary, and these aren't, but they ought to be. So, I have made the first letters small letters. But in case of Abar Khabo, that being a brand name, I have made A and K capital letters. Now, sadly, the publisher's team has mixed these up slightly while typesetting. So, in the book you will find Shorbhaja S capital and K capital, but I promise you in the reprint I will get these corrected. So now the question is, why so many names of sweets? So those unfamiliar with the story of when Vidyadhuri lost her appetite, Vidyadhuri or Ruchi. Vidyadhuri is the sly, plump, middle-aged domestic employee at the lawyer Nilambar Ghosh's household, where she is the lady's maid and senior to her Rosie. A retinue of employees service this household, consisting of the manservant Pitem, the cook Chidam, Vidyadhuri herself, and a host of others. Now enters Purushottam from Odisha, replacing Chidam, who has lost his job because of the wiles of Vidyadhuri. And Vidyadhuri immediately buys his loyalty by promising him wealth. And she writes a false will and testament in which she promises to bequeath him her ornaments, her inheritance. And so Purushottam ends up buying her sweets with 3 months worth of his own salary. He does not send money home at all, and he spends his entire salary, 3 months straight, he spends his salary to buy treats for Vidyadhuri. Then one day, truth dawns on him, and he decides to take his revenge. So the story is about whether he wins or whether Vidyadhuri wins. So it is basically even literally kitchen politics, and it is also seen, like this kind of thing is also seen in corporate offices, even in, inside political parties, maybe even families. It is a study of human behavior and human loyalties and how they shift and change. And it is funny simply because it is outrageous. So these are the sweets, among others, that our Vidyadhuri likes to eat to cure herself of her orangey. So that's why I thought I will include it, because I think it is an important point, important thing to own your what you have. You own, basically own your heritage. I didn't want to use the word heritage because it's used and misused and abused in so many ways. But basically, you have to own what you have, because you have to go into the world with what you have, as who you are. What you have is who you are. So I'll go on to the next topic. Please show the next slide. So this is how I have navigated the question of Shoti, or the honest woman, or feminine honesty. Because I don't believe it rests primarily in the woman being intimate with one person or turning away from life itself in order to maintain that exclusivity. You have Panchakonna in Mahabharata. Neither of them had only one husband or one partner. I can go on, actually. I will not digress. So I prefer the word Shahmoran instead. And I have used it in the glossary, and I have translated it as feminine comorbidity in marriage, and that makes sense perfectly. This is how I express my opinion. For the title, Megher Kole Jhikimiki Shoti Ashe Fiki Fiki, again, this is something I wanted to touch upon. I use the word, this cloud has a silver lining, behold the honest woman who is smiling. Because that is the scopus of the author, to present his heroine as an honest woman in every sense. And with that, I don't have any quarrel. I choose to present it as incidental, that in the story that follows, she also takes part in the Shahmoran ritual, or commits, as they say, sati. And I leave it to the reader to exercise their own judgment as to the acceptability of her act and the integrity of her character, or even the personal wisdom of the author in backing this practice. And this is outside the scope of my work. All I have done is to facilitate this thought. Then I have taken the opposite direction in Pujar Booth. Pujar Booth is the name of a story I have translated as the Durga Puja spooks. It is all about how a family is ruined when a father turns away his daughter and granddaughter because the daughter had married against his wishes. So in the story, there is a place where the daughter says, Baba, তুমি পিতা বটে কিন্তু স্ত্রীলোকের প্রতিই সর্বস্ব. And this I have put through the lens of modern ethics, and I have written it as, Father, I'm an adult now. I am the master of my own destiny, and an adult woman's destiny lies with her own mate. An adult's destiny lies with their own mate, irrespective of being a man or woman. So this is interpretive in a particular way. This is not necessarily how the author thinks, but it is equally powerful. And for all purposes, it means the same thing that was said by the author in that place in the story. Next slide, please. So I would now, this is all about equivalence. And I have levels of equivalence, types of equivalence. Equivalence can be considered by, at various levels: word level, sentence level, text level. And then you have the formal equivalence and the dynamic equivalence. These are all important tools about and ways to think about translation. So when you are translating dialects, do you always use the equivalence principle? Or do you sometimes incorporate a little bit of the original to give the reader a taste, a sound, or a feel of the language? Now, two of the speakers here in the past, at least two of them, have disagreed with what I'm about to say, because I do use the principle of equivalence wherever applicable. In the case of the new writer I'm translating, for instance, I have used the Jamaican Patwa to replace the Murshidabad dialect of Bengali in direct speech between a farmer and a student. And it works because it is coarse and sincere and spontaneous. Yes, please?
No, it was just accidentally pressed. Very sorry.
Okay. So I have, as I said, used Jamaican Patwa, and it has worked very beautifully, as far as I can see. Again, in Trailokyanath's Konkabuti, I have gone in the opposite direction. When the mosquito father, who's the father of the mosquito child whom Konkabuti has befriended, recites injunctions in Sanskrit addressed to Indians in Kali Yuga, I leave the verse as is for effect. And only in the next paragraph do I go on to explain its meaning in plain English. And this I do because, just like Trailokyanath himself, I wanted to showcase the absurdity of a mosquito reciting Sanskrit slokas. And finally, I would like to touch upon another side of Trailokyanath, a lesser known side of Trailokyanath. Trailokyanath himself as a reteller of stories. So the first volume of my book contains the stories Rostam and Bhanumati and the legend of Raiku, both of which are retellings of folk tales, one from Iran and the other from Japan. Out of these two, the Japanese retelling, though most pleasant to read in the Bengali original, is a faithful retelling of the story. The Iranian story, on the other hand, contains some Indian embellishments like Ayurveda medicine, Chalemel, and Mahadev Churna. And yes, I would in due course. So we have these Brahmin characters also in the Iranian folk tale. The hero himself, who is called Rostam, is purported to have Brahminic origins. His mother is a Brahmini, and he is educated by a Brahmin teacher. He reads the Hindu scriptures in the Avestan language. And I actually remember, while doing the translation, I went around the homeopathy and naturopathy stores in Calcutta asking about the composition of Jhalemel and Mahadev Churna, because I wanted to give a full description in my glossary. So it's Indianized to that extent. Interestingly, in Bhanumati and Rostam, Trailokyanath also introduces us to Nishapur, Nechbur. He has preferred the version because it's also called Nishapur. Initially, I thought it was a place somewhere to the north of India. It turns out it is a part of northeastern Iran, which was the seat of the primordial magic kings who were also sorcerers. And one of them is the villain in the story. He is the man who covets and then kidnaps Bhanumati from whose clutches. Then she must be rescued by her friends, Rostam, Sadi, and Tara. They're all like, little more than children. So they go and rescue Bhanumati, and then finally they get married, Rostam and Bhanumati. Her hand is given as a prize by her father to Rostam. Nishapur survives even to this day, and it is one of the tier 3 cities in modern Iran. It is a small population. This is one interesting information from Rostam and Bhanumati. Now, the 3 stories Trailokyanath has actually adapted into Bengali, incorporating significant changes, are Pujar Bhut, the Durga Puja spooks, Bhutar Bari, and Pithe Parbone Chine Bhut. Now, the Durga Puja spooks that I just mentioned, Durga Puja spooks is about a little girl ghost who haunts a boy who has come home for a puja break from the school hostel. And she's accompanied by a strange, mysterious woman who seems to be her mother and who is very kindly, and the little girl only wants to play. And then there is a spectral Durga Puja in the house, during which the secret that is haunting the house is unraveled. The story has so many Bengali elements. The Jamindar Haveli, with the Sadar Bari and the Andor Mahal, separated by an inner courtyard in place of an English mansion. In the stormy nights in a Bengali village under the light of a lantern with no electricity. The hurricane lamp, the puja festival itself with its familiar sounds of dhak and bells and chanting of mantras and treats of koi, murki, narkel, sandesh, the relatives and the forms of address and the nature of the relationships between them. These are all very, very Bengali elements, and they permeate the story so very well and so seamlessly that it will be hard to guess that this is actually an adaptation of a story by an underrated 19th century novelist, Mrs. Elizabeth Gaskell. And that story is called The Old Nurse's Story. I am sure with its dry English atmospherics, it was less moving and less mesmerizing than the adaptation. And in my opinion, this has also happened in the case of Pithe Parbone Chine Bhut. This is a retelling of Arthur Conan Doyle's The Brown Hand. It is full of campy Boitoki humor. It's all about a surgeon who's trained in Burma who collects limbs of amputees, preserving them in formaldehyde, making for a very harrowing exhibition inside the house. And then there is a spate of this poltergeist-like activity. Naturally, the inmates of the house are put under a great deal of stress and they are desperate to get rid of the spirit that is haunting the house. After putting their heads together, the doctor and his friend decide that one of these amputees must be coming back for his hand to make him whole. So they go and procure a hand and they leave it in the jar, only to see the spirit, upon seeing the hand, smash the jar, emit a strange wailing noise as if he is in great agony, and leave the place immediately. So then they realize that of all the possibilities that could have taken shape, they have actually mistaken a right hand for a left one. And this they figure out after much thought. So they go and get a right hand. And as an apology for putting the ghost through such pain, they treat him to an assortment of Bengali pithe, which is sweet rice dumplings, as you all know, with coconut and jaggery filling, fried or placed in jaggery syrup or milk. So in the original story, the ghost was an Afghan. In the adaptation, it is a Chinaman. And in the original pithe, which is so endearing, the element of the theme of the pithe, the element of the pithe at the end of the story. And then Bhutar Bari, it is another haunting. It is an adaptation of Sir Edward Bulwer Lytton's The Haunted and the Haunters. It is also alternatively called The House and the Brain, where a man manages to spend a night in a haunted house. But in my personal opinion, this is the most faithful of the 3 authored stories, but the one that is least entertaining. So I don't know if you found my translation techniques a little bit pernickety, but this is a small part of my experience trekking through the great and wonderful world of Trailokyanath. And you may now ask me questions. Coming to the end.
Okay, so Sucheta, I will come to the discussion part. Many interest. Okay, Joanna, we have a query from Joanna. Joanna, please go ahead. You can turn on your mic and interact directly.
Yes, thank you for a very interesting lecture and a lot of interesting comparison. I have a question regarding register. Because actually,
I beg your pardon? I beg your pardon.
register. I'm bahasha register সম্পর্কে আমার একটি প্রশ্ন আছে.
Okay.
About register of the language, because in the very original text, we have a very familiar language. Like I will give you maybe an example. Tomar mag moruk, tomar meye moruk. Okay, the form moruk is very familiar. Okay, and in translation, in English, we have may your wife expire, may your daughter meet her death. So syntactically speaking, may your wife expire, may expire. This is very formal, high register English language. And also the very word expire, okay? Because here there are like two different expressions for the same Bengali word. Okay, we have moruk, okay, in the original, in the Mul Banglai. And in English, we have two different expressions. Meet her death is like more poetic, I would say, but expire is formal. And the very syntax, may your wife expire. So what I'm trying to, my question is, why did you decide to change the register from very familiar in the original to very formal in English?
Right. So to begin with, I did not want to use the word mag. Mag basically means a dependent, a person. Like we have two kinds of usages of this word itself. We have Magian Minche, which means woman and a man, and we have Mag and Bhatar, where Mag is the person who depends on the Bhatar for her rice, and she is invariably female. Like it is like a deterministic setup where the female has to depend on the man for rice. And as soon as I use wife, the tonality changes of the sentence. So that is why I changed. That's why I wrote it the way I did.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
Thank you, Joanna. That was a very interesting question.
Yes.
And now I request Sucheta to please respond to Nandini ma'am's question. That is also a very interesting question. She has requested you to provide an example of Murshidabadi dialect translating into Jamaican.
Okay, I'll consult the book.
Yeah, please. And I request our other participants to please, put down your queries, questions on the chat box. We have room for discussions, questions if you want. And if I will wait for a while, and then I myself have a few questions.
Oh, lovely.
Yeah. But I'll let you find Nandini ma'am's answer first.
Yes. So these are all like small bits of dialogue. I need to find out. Just give me a couple of seconds.
Sure.
So there's one part where he says, "Koti cholla ujir bhai." তাই তো এখানে? হ্যাঁ, "Koti cholla ujir bhai." আমি বলছি হচ্ছে, where you go, ujir bhai. It's just small bits like that. তারপরে there is another part where he says, কি গাঁজাখুরের মতন কথা বলছো উজির ভাই, রমনার ঘাসে জঙ্গলে কাছিম থাকবে কি করি? কাছিম তো টিভিতে থাকে, আসাদুলদের বাড়ির টিভিতে, আমি দেখাচ্ছি। হ্যাঁ, এটা দিস ইজ দ্য অরিজিনাল। লেটস সি হোয়াট আই হ্যাভ ডান।
I request Nandini ma'am, if you want to interact.
Sure,
please
sure.
go ahead.
Yes.
Yeah. So I just wanted to see how it translates.
Yes, of course. This is actually deep inside the text, so I'm just finding
You
the
can
bit.
send it to me later then.
No, it will come very quickly. There is the tortoise. So I walk towards Ujir Bhai, ask him, where you find this, Ujir Bhai? In a Ramona. Is Ramona a TV set in Asadul's home that Ujir Bhai can find a tortoise in it? This is his thought. Ramona means it, acha. Just that bit is in Jamaican.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's interesting.
Okay.
Thank
Yeah.
you.
Thank you.
I specifically enjoyed this question by Nandini ma'am and the information by Sucheta, because I have been brought in Murshidabad and I am a bit familiar with the Murshidabad local language, although I'm not going to use that now. But anyway, still awaiting questions for from our participants. I feel like asking something, so with your permission, Sucheta.
Yes, Devat.
So, Sucheta, like I said, I have always found your attempt to translate Trailokyanath a much needed and quite a daring one, because like I keep on saying, I mean, I was very glad that you mentioned your translation of Shoti Hashe Fiki Fiki. I know a very renowned translator with whom I had the fortune to discuss a few things over a cup of coffee. And he was going on and on about how to translate that Shoti Hashe Fiki Fiki part, maintaining the humor, because it's really tough. But the way you have done it is really commendable and interesting. So I now come to a very different sort of query. You see, you did mention while discussing that মানে ত্রৈলোক্যনাথের একজন পুরুষ হিসেবে আইডেন্টিটি, ওনার চিন্তা ভাবনা, সেগুলি সেই সময়ের পুরুষতান্ত্রিক চিন্তা ভাবনার দ্বারা বেশ কিছুটা প্রভাবিত ছিল, যেটা আমার মনে হয় মানে আমরা তো নিজেদের সময়ের বাইরে পুরোপুরি যেতে পারি না, সেদিক থেকে একটা প্রভাব থাকে। সো হোয়াট ওয়াজ ইয়োর এক্সপিরিয়েন্স অর হোয়াট ওয়াজ ইয়োর টেক অ্যাজ আ woman translator trying to translate work by a man from a particular era, which was very significantly informed by patriarchal ideals?
Okay. If I am really very, very honest, I will say that as a young girl, I would be very disturbed by stories of Sharat Chandra Chattopadhyay and even like Adhunik Bengali writers writing in the 1960s, Narendra Mitra even, who is a very good writer. I would be very disturbed by any reference to any regressive practice, which is seemingly endorsed and even actually endorsed by the author, by the authorial voice. And that changed with maturity. So now I am able to actually appreciate the the rest of the story, and I can actually look at it without any kind of sorrow or anger at all. And as a translator, I try to do justice. I will not sanitize. I want to present the author's flaws as well as his virtues and his thinking to the audience, to the reader. But at the same time, if there is a scope for it, if there is a room for it, I will try to interpret it in my way. without interfering too much in the text, like through a glossary, for instance, and so on and so forth. In case of, I will say, like the text that I sent out, Vidyadhari story. Today I was reading it and then I saw that there are 3 places I made small decisions driven by this kind of a thought. And just let me, I wish I had taken notes, then I would have been able to. The first one was in the first para itself. So, first one was in the first para. Acha, this is not about women and men. This is about Odias and Bengalis. So the original in the first para where Rosie says, "Look here, Vidyadhari, on our master's fair countenance, stop putting lime and sugar. You go around the neighborhood, bumming a piece of jaggery of the grocer, sponging bit of syrup of the confectioner." Accepting a helping of green banana curry from Mrs. Roy. Mrs. Roy is actually Rai Bamni. I have taken out the caste reference. I have kept a status reference. Okay. There is also Urer Dokanet theke phul udi na. So I redacted that because I didn't want to. This is the only place I've redacted anything in the entire text of the book. That is because I didn't want, because the main character here, Purushottam, is an Odia Brahmin who occupies so much of the story. I didn't want to make it seem that Trailokyanath himself is a person who is a Bengali exceptionalist and he does not like Odias. So if I kept it here, that would have, made it seem that way. So I removed that. So these things you do sometimes.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you. So I request our participants, if there is any further query or anything you want to ask about the case study that have. Yes. Nandini.
Lime and shoe black is not going to be a pleasant experience if put on one's cheek. I think that will reach any reader. I mean, that will be conveyed to any reader. I said lime and shoe black. Okay.
Yes. Okay. So I request Gautam Da to let me know if he's here. Gautam Da, are you with us? Gautam Da, তুমি কি আছো?
দেবাদিত্য, আমি এখনো রাস্তায়। ওকে,
আচ্ছা, ঠিক আছে, অসুবিধা নেই। Okay. So I think now we need to move to the concluding part.
Yes.
I can see that we do not have lots of questions today. So I would like to wrap up the session by giving my own feelings. প্রথমত ত্রৈলোক্যনাথের অনুবাদ নিয়ে কথা বলার সময় যে বিষয়গুলি নিয়ে আলোচনা করা দরকার, মানে ত্রৈলোক্যনাথের রসবোধ, ত্রৈলোক্যনাথের বিদেশি গল্পকে নিজেই মানে ছায়া অবলম্বনে লেখা শব্দটা বোধহয় বলা বেটার হবে, মানে মৃন্ময়দাকে রেফার করে বলছি আর কি, যে ছায়া অবলম্বন করে লেখা, এবং ত্রৈলোক্যনাথের নিজের আইডেন্টিটি, ত্রৈলোক্যনাথের নিজের সময়, এই সব কিছুকে মাথায় রেখে কিভাবে ত্রৈলোক্যনাথকে অনুবাদ করা যায় সেই বিষয়টি খুব সুন্দরভাবে আমাদের সেশনে উঠে এসছে। একটি বিষয় আমি আরেকবার জেনে নিতে চাইবো আরো কিছু কথা বলার আগে, সেটা হলো যে ম্যাজিক রিয়েলিজম এর যে কিওয়ার্ডটা আপনি ট্রান্সলেশনের সময় টাইটেলে ব্যবহার করলেন, মানে ওয়াজ ইট আ ভেরি কনসিয়াস চয়েস?
আমি ইনিশিয়ালি স্পেকুলেটিভ ফিকশন কথাটা ব্যবহার করার পক্ষপাতী ছিলাম, কারণ আমি বলতে চাইছিলাম যে উনি নট অনলি ম্যাজিক রিয়েলিজম, which is a big part of speculative fiction, but also world building আর কি। বেসিক্যালি you have the realist fiction, you have the speculative fiction. Speculative fiction you build worlds, and ডমরুধরের স্টোরিতে, ডমরুচরিতে you will find elements of science fiction as well. So I wanted to use the bigger term. But magic realism is also a very important discovery, because he was writing magic realism before magic realism actually became a known term. I think from 1925 প্রথম ওই শব্দটা ব্যবহার হয়েছিল এবং yeah. So now you will ask কি উনি magic realism জিনিসটা কিভাবে মানে উনি কি অ্যাকচুয়ালি লিখছেন? তো ম্যাজিক রিয়েলিজম লিখছেন কি না লিখছেন সেটার তিনটা টেস্ট আছে। একটা হচ্ছে you have to use fantastical elements in realistic situations, which he has done. He has passed that criterion. Second হচ্ছে you have to use these fantastical elements to interpret themes, emotions, social realities. And in case of Konkabati, for instance, he has used this magical theme to interpret her emotions, the disturbance that is going through her mind when she is being forcibly married off to an old man. So, and let me say the third criterion as well. তাহলে আমি second and third criterion কিভাবে একসঙ্গে ও fulfill করছে সেটা আমি বলতে পারবো। The third criterion is that it has to have an element of a radical element somewhere of social change or this thing. And we all know that Trailokyanath was no socialist. He was very far away from the Indian independence movement. That way he was not with the zeitgeist of the times, let's say, which is why he fell by the wayside. Like, because, so that we know of already. He was a humanitarian, all right. So how can we think that Trailokyanath was being radical in any way? সেটা করতে গেলে we have to look at the kind of ghosts that he has created. Okay. I was like, yeah. So Trailokyanath ghosts are of two types. One is the supernatural ghost, dead man spirit, which is the metaphorical ghost. আর একটা metaphysical ghost. আর একটা ghost আছে ওর, সেটা হচ্ছে metaphorical ghost. সেটা করতে গেলে you do not have to die actually. You have to take the job of, you have to take ghost duty. Ghost duty এর জন্য application করছে লুলুতে রয়েছে. People are applying for ghost duty of a man who is already alive. And who are those people? Those people are these subaltern characters, like wraith-like, tiny roga people who live on the margins of society, who their sheer lifestyle gives them the resilience, the ability to fly, for instance, like Lulu, or survive underwater. Do these things which are not possible by ordinary middle class people. So to be able to imagine, to be able to romanticize, to be able to think about these people and also create this special place for them in your imagination, that itself is a radical act. And that is how he is fulfilling the third criterion as well as depicting their social reality, which is the second criterion. So who says he is not writing magic realism?
Absolutely. I agree with you. And I asked, মানে আমি এই বিষয়টা যে তুলে আনলাম তার একটা বিশেষ কারণ আছে। কারণটি হলো, আমার যেটা মনে হয় সেটা হচ্ছে আপনি মানে আমি কাইন্ড অফ এটা ধরে নিচ্ছি যে আপনি যেহেতু আমাদের এই স্লটটিতে মানে পপুলার ফিকশনকে বাংলায় লেখা পপুলার ফিকশনকে ইংলিশে অনুবাদ করার ক্ষেত্রে ত্রৈলোক্যনাথকে কেস স্টাডি হিসেবে ব্যবহার করার ব্যাপারে যখন আপনি সম্মত হয়েছেন, সেক্ষেত্রে আপনি অ্যাকনলেজ করছেন যে ত্রৈলোক্যনাথকে একজন পপুলার ফিকশন রাইটার অফ বেঙ্গল দেখা যায় এবং দেখা উচিত, এবং which is where we both agree, and I'm sure a lot of others would also agree. এবার এই বিষয়টি নিয়ে বলার ক্ষেত্রে আমার দুটো জিনিস আমি বলতে চাইবো। সেটা হলো যে রাজর্ষি আলোচনাটিকেও আমি একটু টেনে আনবো, তার কারণ রাজর্ষি এর ঠিক উল্টো যাত্রাটা নিয়ে বলেছিল যে অন্য ভাষার পপুলার ফিকশনকে বাংলায় অনুবাদ করে আনছি যখন। এবং একটা ব্যাপার আমি যশোধরাদির আলোচনাকেও একটু রেফার করব, সেটা হচ্ছে যে উনি যেরকম বলছিলেন যে অনুবাদ করার ক্ষেত্রে অনুবাদ যে ভাষায় করা হচ্ছে সেই ভাষাটি কতটা পাওয়ারফুল সেটা আমাদের অনেক সময় মাথায় রাখতে হয়। এবং এই কথাটির সাথে কিছুটা সম্মত হয়েও আমি এটা বলবো যে বাংলা পপুলার ফিকশনকে ইংলিশে ট্রান্সলেট করাটাও ভীষণ জরুরি কাজ। এবং ইয়েস, মারা, আই উইল immediately come to your query. It's a very nice one, but let me just finish. বাংলার পপুলার ফিকশনকে ইংলিশে ট্রান্সলেট করার মধ্যে যদিও আমরা ভাবতেই পারি যে হ্যাঁ আমি একটা অনেক বেশি পাওয়ারফুল ল্যাঙ্গুয়েজের দিকে ট্রান্সলেট করছি, সো আই এম বিকামিং আ পার্ট অফ দ্য পাওয়ার পলিটিক্স এটসেট্রা এটসেট্রা, এটা আমরা মনে করতে পারি। কিন্তু অ্যাট দ্য সেম টাইম আমার মনে হয় যে বাংলার পপুলার ফিকশনকে ইংলিশে নিয়ে যাওয়াটা খুব জরুরি, আজকের দিনে খুব জরুরি। তার কারণ আমি নিজে ব্যক্তিগতভাবে এই জিনিসটাতে বিশ্বাস করি যে সারা বিশ্বে আজকে জাপানিজ, রাশিয়ান এবং আরো বেশ কিছু ভাষার গল্প খুব জনপ্রিয় হয়েছে ইংলিশে ঢোকার পর থেকে। আমি ঢোকা শব্দটা কনসিয়াসলি ইউজ করলাম, যে তারা ইংলিশে জাস্ট ঢুকে পড়েছেন। এবার ঢুকে পড়ার ফলে কতটা মানে একটা এবড়ো খেবড়ো শেপ তৈরি হয়েছে, যেটা মানে আলাদা আলাদা সংস্কৃতির ফ্রিকশনের মাধ্যমে তৈরি হয়, সেই তর্কে যাব না। কিন্তু বাংলা ভাষার গল্পকে ইংলিশে নিয়ে যাওয়াটা খুব দরকার ছিল, এবং সেই জায়গাতে আমার এটাও মনে হয় যে আমরা করার সময় এটা নিয়েও কেউ কেউ বলতেই পারেন যে আমি কি তাহলে আমাকে একটা অ্যাপোলজিস্টের মতো কাজ করতে হবে, যে আমার বাংলা ভাষার অমুক সাহিত্যকে আমি অনুবাদ করছি, তখন ম্যাজিক রিয়ালিজম, স্পেকুলেটিভ ফিকশন এরকম একটা টার্মিনোলজি যেটা অ্যাংলো আমেরিকান বা অ্যাংলোস্ফিয়ারের লোকজন খুব পছন্দ করে, সেটা না জুড়ে দিলে ওটা কেউ পড়বে না, এরকম অভিযোগ আসতে পারে। কিন্তু আমি মনে করি যে এইভাবে ম্যাজিক রিয়ালিজম, স্পেকুলেটিভ ফিকশন এই মার্কার গুলো জুড়ে দেওয়াটাও খুব জরুরি। তার কারণ আমার মনে হয় যে যে কোনো ধরনের জনরা ফিকশন, যে কোনো ধরনের ট্র্যাডিশন অফ ফিকশন, ফর ইনস্ট্যান্স ইফ ইউ টক অ্যাবাউট ডিটেকটিভ ফিকশন, আমরা ডিটেকটিভ ফিকশন শব্দটা আসার অনেক আগে দেখতে পাচ্ছি অয়দিপাউসের গল্পে ডিটেকটিভ ফিকশনের প্রায় সব এলিমেন্ট আছে, আমরা হ্যামলেটে দেখতে পাচ্ছি। সেক্ষেত্রে মানে একটা জনরা কোন জায়গাতে তৈরি হচ্ছে সেটা বড় কথা না, আমরা তার আগের কোনো গল্প, যে সময়ে ডিটেকটিভ ফিকশন, ম্যাজিক রিয়েলিজম এসব তৈরি হয়েছে, তার আগের কোনো গল্পে যদি আমরা সেই সবের লক্ষণ পাই, সেটাকে ম্যাজিক রিয়েলিজম হিসেবে পড়ার মতো স্কোপ থাকে, তাহলে আই উড অলওয়েজ এগ্রি যে সেটা করা উচিত। এবং আপনি যে সেটা করেছেন, সেটা আমি মনে করি ত্রৈলোক্যনাথকে কাইন্ড অফ রেস্কিউ করার একটা প্রসেস এর অংশ হয়ে উঠবে। তার কারণ আমি ব্যক্তিগতভাবে ত্রৈলোক্যনাথের খুব বড় ভক্ত ছোটবেলা থেকেই। ত্রৈলোক্যনাথের লেখা আমাকে ভীষণভাবে হাসায়, ভাবায়। বিশেষ করে একটা কথা, যেহেতু আপনি ভূতের কথা বলছেন, অন্ধকার জমিয়া জমিয়া ভূত হয়, এরকম একটা অসাধারণ কথা তিনি বলে গেছেন, যেটা আই থিঙ্ক ক্যান বি আ ভেরি ইন্টারেস্টিং ফুড ফর থট ফর people who are doing gothic studies or study of horror or specters.
ভূত মরিয়া মার্বেল হয়,
হ্যাঁ একদম ভূত মরিয়া মার্বেল। তো মানে উই হ্যাভ টু রেস্কিউ দিস ভয়েসেস ফ্রম বেঙ্গল, এবং তাদেরকে যে পপুলার রাইটার হিসেবে অ্যাকনলেজ করা দরকার, সেটা আপনাদের মতো কাজগুলির মাধ্যমে বোঝা যায়। বাট আই থিঙ্ক আই হ্যাভ টেকেন লং এনাফ। I should immediately now come back to Mara's question, which is very interesting, and I will also request Mara, if you want to interact in person, we have time, so you can do that, or else I will read out your query.
I can read mine out, and I just wanted to say I agree with the points that you were making. I'm actually, as you may know, maybe only you did,
I know,
I'm interested in Bhutan Golfo, so I really enjoyed this session. I'm hoping to do a Humayun Ahmad story for my assignment. But anyway, I was curious because you mentioned in the beginning of your lecture choosing to use a Victorian style of English in your translation with some modern updates as necessary. And I just wondered if you had any suggestions for how you learn to write authentically in sort of other temporalities, because Victorian English is very complicated, of course. And so I wondered, did you do any sort of formal studies of time-bound slang and idioms, or how do you learn to kind of write in another voice that way?
Again, this is like, I would say that I did it intuitively, and I write a lot. I write different kinds of, compositions. I'm a journalist, so I do, like, even as a journalist, I write many different kinds, but I am also a creative writer. And depending on the kind of story that I'm writing, I will choose a kind of voice. Also, inside the story, I have different voices for different characters. So it wasn't very hard for me. I did not have to do a formal study. I don't know if this is like my answer is too short.
No, that's okay. It's helpful actually. I mean, I thought you might say that. I've been asking a lot of questions as I meet
But it is
translators,
true.
and sometimes I think I'm overthinking, and sometimes I think I'm
No.
underthinking. So I'm always curious about people's
No,
process.
Mara, curiosity is always welcome for us.
So your question is a good question, but this was my approach. I think because my approach was not an academic approach, it had its merits, it had its advantages, let us say. So my approach was basically as a writer. So yeah.
Okay, so I think we don't have any more queries, but I thank our participants. Okay, Shostik, please.
Am I audible?
Yes, Shostik, শোনা যাচ্ছে।
একটা জিনিস জিজ্ঞাসা করতাম যে ট্রান্সলেশনের কি কোনো এজ হয়, মানে এটা টেম্পোরাল বলা যেতে পারে যে আমি কোনো একটা জিনিসকে 100 বছর আগে মানে ট্রান্সলেট করেছি একটা জেনারেশন, পরবর্তী জেনারেশন হয়তো আরেকটা টাইম পরে ট্রান্সলেট করছে, তো মানে ট্রান্সলেশনটা মানে কোনো দীর্ঘ সময় ধরে থাকছে না, মানে মেল টেক্সট হয়তো দীর্ঘ সময় ধরে থাকছে। রবীন্দ্রনাথের মানে তিনি যে সময়ে ভাষাটাকে লিখছেন সে সময় যে চলিত ভাষা বা ব্যবহারিক ভাষা সেগুলো হয়তো অনেক বেশি ছিন্ন ছিল বা একটু আলাদা ছিল। রবীন্দ্রনাথ সেটাকে হয়তো একটি রাবীন্দ্রিক বিষয় বানিয়ে দিয়েছেন। তাহলে তখনকার দিনে দাঁড়িয়ে অনেক লেখক রয়েছেন যেগুলো বিষয়টিকে রাবীন্দ্রিক হিসেবে অনেক প্রাচীন বাংলার লেখাকে ট্রান্সলেট করছেন। বিদ্যাপতিকে অনেকে তৎকালীন বাংলায় ট্রান্সলেট করছেন, এখনকার দিনেও হচ্ছে, কিন্তু একটা টেম্পোরালিটি রয়েছে, একটা গ্যাপ হয়তো দেখতে পাওয়া যাচ্ছে। এই বিষয়টির উপর যদি কিছু বলেন।
Devaditya, can you respond? How would you respond? I'm curious. Otherwise, I can respond as well.
আমি প্রথমত যেটা বলবো সেটা হচ্ছে স্বস্তিকের প্রশ্নটি খুব তাৎপর্যপূর্ণ, এ ব্যাপারে কোনো সন্দেহ নেই, খুব সুন্দর। এবং আমি নিজে এগেন মানে হয়তো আমিও কিছুটা ইনটুইটিভ ওয়েতেই করে থাকি, বাট হ্যাঁ মানে কিছু কিছু সময় আমি কোনো একটা নির্দিষ্ট সময়কে যদি ধরতে চাই তাহলে আমি সেই সময়টার ভাষা বা অন্তত সেই সময়ের সাহিত্য নিয়ে একটু নাড়াচাড়া করার চেষ্টা করি। যেমন ফর ইনস্টেন্স আমি একটা উদাহরণ দিচ্ছি যে আমি যদি কোনো কারণে আমি শেক্সপিয়ারের সময়টাকে আমি ধরতে চাই কোনো একটা ইংলিশের মাধ্যমে, আমি জানি না এখানে স্বস্তিক তুমি ব্যাপারটা খেয়াল করেছো কিনা, শেক্সপিয়ারের সময়ে দাও আর ইউ এই দুটির ব্যবহারের মধ্যে একটা খুব ইন্টারেস্টিং ডিফারেন্স ছিল। মানে দাও আর ইউ এই দুটোর লিটারাল মিনিং আমরা জানি যে একই, কিন্তু দাও আর ইউ এর ইউসেজের ক্ষেত্রে একটা ফর্মালিটি ইনফর্মালিটির ইকুয়েশন তৈরি হতো। ফর ইনস্টেন্স আমরা যদি হ্যামলেট নাটকটি দেখি সেখানে দাও এরও ব্যবহার আছে, ইউ এরও ব্যবহার আছে খুব ইন্টারেস্টিংলি, এবং সেটা মাঝে মধ্যে সুইচ হতে থাকে। আমি পার্টিকুলারলি মানে আমি একদম স্পেসিফিক দেওয়ার চেষ্টা করছি রেফারেন্সটা। ক্লডিয়াস হ্যামলেটের সাথে যখন কথোপকথন করছে তখন হ্যামলেটকে সে যেভাবে কখনো কখনো দাও কখনো কখনো ইউ সম্বোধন করছে, বা একই সময়ে যখন গার্ট্রুড সেখানে উপস্থিত আছে গার্ট্রুড যে সম্বোধনগুলি বেছে নিচ্ছে তার মধ্যে দিয়ে বোঝা যায় যে ক্লডিয়াস কখনো কখনো হ্যামলেটকে যেন একটু দূরে রাখার চেষ্টা করছে আর গার্ট্রুড তাকে কাছে টেনে নিচ্ছে। তো এই ধরনের নুয়ান্সেস যদি আমি কোনো টেক্সটে খুঁজে পাই তাহলে অবশ্যই আমি সেই ধরনের মানে টাইম স্ট্যাম্প বা মার্কার অফ টেম্পোরালিটিকে ইউজ করব, but otherwise I will just let the text flow naturally. That would be my response.
Okay, I was going to say that like whether or not this decision lies in your decision, whether or not you want to do an adaptation to it with a specific adaptation of it with a specific reason in mind or specific objective in mind, like you want to adapt it to the modern times, say, or you want to create something out of it with a specific purpose in mind. So you change the language. Basically, it is about how faithful you want to be to the original text, and whether you want to give the flavor of the original text to the reader, or you just want to tell a story and tell a better story. So that is where your this choice lies.
Yeah. Got it.
Thank you, Swastik. Thank you, Sucheta, for the interaction. We always have room for these kind of interactions, and uh, I'm very happy that we could discuss some of Trailokyanath as well as a part of this session, because I think Trailokyanath, yes. Joanna is saying that recreate the rasa flavor.
Yes.
Yes, thank you, Joanna. And I would also especially thank Sucheta for talking about the sweets, because I think it's always very interesting to tackle the issue of translating the name of the food that you come across. Because মানে খাবারের ব্যাপারটা, for instance, let me give another personal experience of mine. I was doing this while discussing about one article that I did with some friends from America. They were really curious to know what jhalmuri is, and then I had quite a hard time. Yes, Nandini ma'am. Thank you for saying that.
What does she say? I guess it is a balance. ওটা একটু পড়বেন, আমি half
Yeah,
page.
sure. I guess it's a balance between maintaining the original flavor of the source text and telling a story that reads easy in the target language.
That's right. Okay.
So,
Yes.
So as I was saying, মানে খাবারের নামগুলি ট্রান্সলেট করাটা খুব কিউরিয়াস হয়ে যায়। মানে ফর ইনস্টেন্স, ইফ ইউ আর ট্রান্সলেটিং সামথিং অ্যাজ পপুলার অ্যাজ পারাঠা অর বিরিয়ানি মেবি, সেক্ষেত্রে পারাঠা বিরিয়ানি এই শব্দগুলো ইউজ করা হয়তো যাবে, বিকজ অর ফর ইনস্টেন্স দ্য ভেরি ফেমাস টিক্কা, আই এম শিওর মানে মোটামুটি গোটা বিশ্বে টিক্কা বিরিয়ানি এই শব্দগুলি প্রচলিত হয়ে গেছে। বাট when it comes to something like সরভাজা, পায়েস, I always find it curious যে আমরা মানে এইগুলি ট্রান্সলেশন কিভাবে করব উইদাউট losing the essence. And I think one strategy that Sucheta has shown is very, very interesting. And with all these, I think we really enjoyed the session. I'm sure a lot of us have been encouraged to read or reread Trailokyanath, which I think has been a part of our goal behind arranging such sessions. So Sucheta, thank you so much. And I really wish you keep on translating more writers who quote unquote need to be rescued, because I'm sorry to say, মানে এটা আমার খুব বলতে কষ্ট লাগে, সেটা হচ্ছে যে ত্রৈলোক্যনাথের মতন একজন অসাধারণ লেখক, আমি এই বিষয়টি আমি জানি না, মানে ইফ আই এম রং প্লিজ কারেক্ট মি এনিওয়ান, ত্রৈলোক্যনাথের এখনো পর্যন্ত কোনো স্ট্যান্ডার্ড বাংলা পাবলিশিং হাউস থেকে একটা প্রপার কালেকশন হয়নি। এটা আমাকে ভীষণ কষ্ট দেয় যে মানে আমরা কেন করতে পারলাম না, আমি সত্যি ভেবে পাইনি। কিন্তু ত্রৈলোক্যনাথের মতন একজন লেখক, তাকে আমরা আস্তে আস্তে যদি এভাবে হারিয়ে যেতে দিই, সেটা বোধহয় আমাদের হিস্ট্রি, আমাদের হেরিটেজের একটা বিরাট ক্ষতি হবে। কিন্তু আমার মনে হয় যখন বাংলা থেকে সে কাজটা হচ্ছে না, তখন না হয় সেটাকে বাংলার বাইরে নিয়ে গিয়েই দেখা যাক কি হয়। এবং সুচেতা সেই কাজটি করছেন, এবং আমি সুচেতাকে আমাদের বাঙালি সংস্কৃতি মাথায় রেখে সাধুবাদ জানাই যে আপনি সেই কাজটি করে চলেছেন। আরো এভাবেই আপনি কাজ করে যান, এবং আমরা অপেক্ষা থাকবো আপনাকে যদি কখনো আমাদের কলেজে একবার নিয়ে আসতে পারি। তখন আমি জানি আপনি বিভিন্ন লিটারেচার ফেস্টিভ্যালে গিয়ে থাকেন, সেখানেও সম্প্রতি কোকরাঝাড় লিটারেচার ফেস্টিভ্যালে আপনি সম্ভবত বক্তব্য রেখেছিলেন। Am I right, or am I mixing up?
Yes. I did go to Kokrajhar in February, and before that I have gone to Jaipur, but then Jaipur আমি লেখক হিসেবে যাইনি, আমি সাংবাদিক হিসেবে গিয়েছি।
একদম। তো থ্যাংক ইউ সো মাচ। আর আমি গৌতম দাকে আরেকবার জেনে নেব। গৌতম দা, তুমি কি কিছু বলবে? আচ্ছা, I think Gautam Das is still on the road, and it's definitely not very safe to continue speaking. So
Yes.
With a lot of thanks to everyone, especially Sucheta, for joining us, because I'm not disclosing details, but I can only say that she was going through a very challenging time these days, but she still managed to join us. And thank you so much.
নমস্কার।